My name is Alex Monroe. I'm 38 years old, and I hold the rank of captain in the United States Army. I work out of the Pentagon as a strategic risk analyst, specializing in pre-deployment infrastructure planning and operational risk assessment for high-priority missions. For the last 9 years, my job has been to spot cracks before they break, to catch blind spots before they cost lives, and to make damn sure every blueprint we greenlighted could survive pressure, time, and chaos. Most days, I spent more time with technical specs and probability matrices than I did with people. I liked it that way. The data was clean. The truth in numbers didn't bend to rank or favor. The Army taught me discipline, respect, and structure. But the Pentagon? It taught me politics. It taught me how titles could carry more weight than facts, and how chain of command didn't always mean chain of merit. I learned to speak carefully, to document everything, and to watch what happened behind closed doors just as closely as what was said out in the open. Still, I believed in the mission. I believed in service. I believed that behind the briefings, the jargon, and the back-channel nods, there were still people trying to get it right. That belief kept me grounded, even as the system started showing signs of rot. I didn't know it then, but one decision, one quiet betrayal, would drag me into a fight I never asked for. Not on a battlefield, not under fire, but inside the walls of the most secure building in the world, where the real damage came from whispers, paperwork, and silence, and where, sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is tell the truth. It happened on a Thursday morning. I was halfway through my briefing on threat variance models in Southeast Asia, standing beneath 3 massive screens in a sealed Pentagon conference room. My voice was steady, my slides clean, and all 50 sets of eyes in that room were on me. I saw the notification pop up without looking down. Just the preview. My phone was face up beside the mic panel. Message from Colonel Briggs. Flight canceled. Figure it out yourself. At first, I thought it was a joke. A test. Some dry military sarcasm to see if I'd flinch. But then I caught the second part. Conference hotels are expensive. Hope your per diem covers it. I didn't break stride. I kept talking. My training kicked in, muscle memory took over, but my stomach turned cold. Colonel Briggs was sitting dead center, arms crossed, a smirk just curling under his mustache like he already knew what I'd just seen. I locked eyes with him for a beat too long. He didn't blink. That was the moment I knew it wasn't a glitch, wasn't a slip. It was deliberate. A message dressed like logistics, a public gut punch masked as protocol. My throat felt tight, but I kept moving through the data. 1 more chart, 2 more bullet points. I could barely hear my own voice. The room blurred. My pulse thudded in my ears. But I didn't stumble. I refused to give him the show he wanted. Then I reached the final slide. I paused. Let it sit. Let the silence stretch just long enough to pull the oxygen out of the air. I looked down, closed the laptop, slow and deliberate. Then I met their eyes. The printed packets include full methodology. Thank you for your time. And I walked. No explanations, no questions. Just the sound of my boots crossing polished floor, chair legs shifting, someone coughing behind me. I didn't turn around. Didn't give Colonel Briggs another second of my attention. The door closed behind me like a vault ceiling shut. I hit the hallway and stopped breathing. The air felt heavier than it should have. Clean, recycled, institutional, but thick with something else. Weight, tension, power games played in silence and suits. I stood there for a full minute before I could move. All those years of service, discipline, loyalty, and in one quiet message, he'd stripped it down to a threat. This wasn't about the flight. This was about sending a signal. Stay in your lane. Remember your place. Be useful, but not visible. But I'd already seen too much. Already kept too many receipts. And in that instant, something in me shifted. The man who walked out of that room wasn't the same one who walked in. I wasn't stranded. I was ready. And I was done pretending not to notice the cracks in the system I'd sworn to protect. Over the last 3 years, I'd led the risk assessments for over a dozen defense infrastructure projects. Forward base hardening in Eastern Europe, surveillance array logistics in the Pacific. I built the models, ran the numbers, flagged the gaps before they became headlines. But when the briefings went up the chain, when the folders got thicker with approvals, my name was gone. The reports had been scrubbed clean of attribution. The summaries carried one author, Colonel Briggs. At first, I told myself it was protocol, chain of command, need-to-know handling. But then I watched her deliver my analysis to the Joint Readiness Board using my phrasing, my charts, even my color codes. I sat in the back row, in uniform, watching her take a standing ovation for work I stayed up nights perfecting. I kept my posture straight, jaw tight. Didn't speak, didn't show a thing. That's how you survive at the Pentagon. You keep your head down and your files backed up. But it kept happening. Every report I submitted came back with my name buried in footnotes, if mentioned at all. When high-profile visitors toured our office, I was told to work remotely. When questions came in about projections or structural risks, she'd answer them using my wording, almost like she'd memorized me. I wasn't asking for medals. I didn't need public praise, but I did want fairness. A seat at the table I helped set. Instead, I was treated like a ghost, useful in silence, invisible in the light. And still, I didn't lash out. I documented. I archived. I built a quiet trail of proof, line by line, knowing one day the truth would matter. Or at least, I hoped it would. Because even in the most disciplined systems, the cracks always find a way to show. My first office had a window that faced the memorial grounds. Mid-level, nothing fancy, but enough light to remind me I was still part of something. It felt like acknowledgement, like my work belonged. 6 months later, I came in to find my nameplate gone. A memo pinned to the door said, reassigned, no explanation. The new space had no windows, no airflow, just a humming fluorescent light and walls the color of old concrete. The next move wasn't even announced. I returned from a site visit to find my access badge disabled from my floor. Security handed me a new one and pointed down the hall. My new office was a storage room converted into a workstation. No desk, just a metal table wedged between boxes of surplus equipment and old map tubes. I asked Briggs if this was permanent. She smiled and said it would help me focus. No distractions, no politics, just data. But it wasn't about focus. It was about isolation. About pushing me so far to the margins I couldn't even see the meetings anymore. The emails slowed. My calendar dried up. I stopped getting looped in on review boards, didn't even know about new projects until they were already signed. People stopped dropping by. Some didn't even know I was still there. But I stayed steady. Kept my folders organized, my assessments clean, my notes double-backed. I answered every inquiry that made it through, gave precise numbers when asked. Not to prove anything, just because I still believed the work mattered. I'd been boxed in, literally. Stripped of space, light, voice. But even in that basement, I wasn't broken. I was watching, listening, tracking every cut corner, every misplaced credit. Waiting for the right moment to make it count. The moment I realized what was happening, I stopped trusting shared drives. Every document I wrote, every projection model I built, I saved a second copy offline. Not for revenge, for clarity, for the record. I kept original versions labeled by timestamp, highlighted edits where my warnings were softened or erased entirely. I stored emails that had their phrasing changed. Phrases like strategic inconsistency morphed into manageable deviation. That shift might not mean much to a policymaker, but to someone reading the risks, it changed everything. My system was quiet but exact. A personal server tucked inside a locked cabinet under my desk. It wasn't about hoarding files. It was about defending the truth. I wasn't preparing for war. I was preserving the facts in case someone else started one. Word got around without me saying a thing. Engineers began calling again. Not the ones who sat in meetings, but the ones who worked in field boots, late nights, on tight budgets. They asked questions I could answer, not with fluff, with real numbers. I told them where the load curves failed, why their reinforcement specs wouldn't hold under seasonal freeze cycles. One by one, they came back. I wasn't advertising myself. I was just clear, precise, consistent. That earned more trust than any promotion ever could. Sometimes, someone from another unit would email a risk summary with a simple line at the bottom. Can you confirm? I never editorialized, just sent the data. Once, I included a full breakdown with cross-references to the field test protocols. The reply came 2 minutes later. Knew it. Thanks. I wasn't loud. I wasn't visible, but I was reliable. The one person who didn't blur numbers to match a narrative. That kind of consistency doesn't go unnoticed, even when you're buried in a room without a window. The more I worked in the shadows, the more I saw the pattern. Projects that ran over budget had one thing in common. Someone had altered the original recommendations. Someone wanted shortcuts to look like solutions. So I kept saving. I kept tracking, not to use as weapons, but as anchors. Because someday, I knew someone would ask the question that needed a clean answer, and when they did, I'd be ready. It was a Tuesday morning when the message landed in my inbox, short and to the point. You've been selected to present at the Allied Defense Strategy Conference next month in Berlin. No context, no congratulations, just instructions and a logistics packet. I sat staring at the screen for a full minute. For years, I'd been boxed out of every major meeting, pushed to the sidelines, told my role was too technical for front-facing events. Now suddenly, I was being flown across the Atlantic to speak in front of generals, analysts, and foreign advisors. It didn't add up. Briggs didn't offer an explanation, just said it was my chance to prove myself. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It rarely did, and in that second I understood. This wasn't a gift, it was a trap. She wanted me exposed, alone, out of context, presenting her version of my work in front of people who would smell the inconsistencies. A public stumble would kill any trust I'd rebuilt. One missed answer, one botched chart, and she'd have the excuse she needed to bury me for good. I didn't argue. I thanked her, took the packet, and started my own quiet prep. First, I downloaded the slide deck she'd provided. It was polished, streamlined, filled with talking points and case studies. Every risk model was one I had built. Every projection had originated from my drafts. But her name was listed as division lead, mine as supporting analyst. I cross-checked every figure, compared it to the real version still on my server. At least 3 had been modified to simplify outcomes. Risk ranges narrowed, variables dropped, footnotes removed. She had no idea how to explain the equations behind them. If questioned, she'd fold. But this time, she wouldn't be questioned. I would. So I saved every slide, added backups, and prepared for every counterpoint. Not to protect her, not even to save face. I was done playing the fall guy. I knew what she was setting up. And I also knew, if this was the platform she handed me, I could use it. Not to embarrass her. Not yet. But to plant a seed. To let the right people hear the truth. Without even realizing it at first. Quietly, cleanly. I just had to wait for the moment. And when it came, I wouldn't miss. It started with a phone buzz at 6:43 a.m. One of the field engineers from the Delta Perimeter upgrade sent a message that hit like a cold slap. Water breach in Zone 3. Perimeter sensors failed. Do you have the sign-off specs? I didn't respond right away. Just sat there staring at the screen. My name was listed on the clearance logs. I knew I hadn't touched that final version, not the one they were working off, so I opened my archive and pulled the original. 3 files came up, my draft, her revision, the approved version. I opened all 3, side by side. The difference was subtle at first, then glaring. She'd trimmed the sensor calibration window to save install time, removed my redundancy layer entirely. 2 more emails came in within the hour, one from a project manager, one from a civilian liaison. Both asked the same thing in different tones. Did you actually approve this configuration? I replied with just a file attachment. No words, no blame, just the facts. The original report clearly marked high failure risk without dual redundancy. Her version called it operationally sound. No margin left. By 10 a.m., internal alerts were bouncing. Command wanted incident status updates. Procurement was on standby for emergency response estimates. I knew what was coming. The contractor had flagged the same concerns weeks earlier, but the final approval sailed through under her signature. I sat in my basement office, surrounded by rusted filing cabinets and the hum of cheap ventilation, and watched the cracks form. Not literal ones, systemic, political, procedural. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, it was gravity. The sense that something long overdue had started to fall apart. She had rewritten just enough of my work to make it look like hers, but not enough to make it hold. And now the system was testing her version, in the field, under real pressure. And it was failing. I didn't gloat. I didn't call anyone. Just saved the incident log, noted the timestamp, and waited. The first wall had just given out. The rest wouldn't take long. The email came late on a Friday. Subject line, internal audit request. The department was launching a full-scale review of all defense infrastructure reports from the past 18 months. Originals only. No summaries. No revisions. I didn't flinch. I opened my archive and started pulling files. 63 assessments, each labeled by project code, location, and date. I added the raw data sets, every formula, every field report, and I matched each original with its corresponding revision, the one she submitted under her name. Where my reports had risk flags, her versions had green lights. Where I cautioned against structural tolerances, she marked clear for go. The discrepancies weren't just stylistic, they were operational, safety critical, and now the review board would see them side by side. I packaged everything into a secure file transfer and hit send. No commentary, no cover letter, just the numbers laid bare. Within hours, I got a reply. Receipt confirmed, review in process. Over the next 2 weeks, my inbox grew quiet, but outside that basement office, the volume turned up. More field reports came in. Another failure out west, a miscalculation on a drainage slope, a substation voltage mismatch. Every new issue traced back to one of her sign-offs. People stopped talking openly in the halls. But I caught the side glances, the whispered meetings, the subtle questions floating my way. Did you catch this in your version? Was this flagged in your draft? I always answered the same way. Here's what I submitted. Nothing more. Nothing less. The silence from her office was louder than any denial. She didn't confront me. Didn't stop the review. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she knew it had gone too far to control. But I knew what was coming. The data was too clear. The gap too wide. By week 3, I could feel it building. Not just pressure. Exposure. The story was writing itself in spreadsheets and email threads. And for once, I didn't have to say a word. The numbers were speaking for me. And they were loud. The boardroom was colder than I remembered. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. A long table stretched between me and the chair across from mine, the one she'd be sitting in. I reviewed the files once more. Her name on the roster. Her application thick with charts I built, words I wrote, logic she never understood. The door opened. She walked in sharp. Perfect hair, crisp blazer, the confidence of someone used to being the most important voice in any room. She looked me in the eye as if none of the past 2 years had happened. I nodded once. Neutral, professional. But this time, I was the one with the gavel. 2 other board members flanked me, each with a copy of her submission. She greeted us formally and jumped straight into her presentation. Her tone was polished, rehearsed. The slides behind her lit up with my work, my structure, my layout. She spoke fluently about project goals and performance outcomes. But I was listening for the cracks. 10 minutes in, I leaned forward, asked a question about a specific risk index formula on slide 6. She hesitated, then dodged. Said her team ran the numbers. I asked again. She blinked, shifted in her seat, said she didn't have the raw math in front of her. The room got quieter. Next question. This time about a case study involving rapid setting concrete and load-bearing tolerance. She called it a strategic time saver. I asked what coefficient she used to adjust the curing forecast. She opened her binder, slowly flipping pages. Couldn't find the line. I waited. When she said her role was oversight, not technical execution, I pulled out the printout, highlighted equation, my handwriting still faint behind the cleaned-up chart. I asked her to define one term, just one. Her silence told the whole room she couldn't. The other reviewers looked down at their notes. Nobody interrupted. Nobody came to help her. She tried to pivot, talk big picture again, but it was too late. The mask had slipped. She wasn't presenting her work. She was reciting mine. I closed her binder, thanked her for her time. She stood, nodded tightly, and walked out without another word. Her heels echoed down the hallway. She didn't look back. I wrote the evaluation that night. Professional, direct, verified against every submission. She had failed to demonstrate basic technical knowledge of the projects she claimed to lead. The board backed the decision. Unanimous, no appeal. For the first time, she had to answer to me. And when the moment came, she had nothing to say. In the months that followed, she lost everything that mattered to her. Not her salary, not her title, but her access, her influence, the power to make decisions without being questioned. It all slipped away quietly. She was still in the building, still walked the same halls. But now, her approvals required secondary review. Her recommendations were double-checked. Meetings moved on without her voice carrying weight. Eventually, even the ambitious ones stopped orbiting her. It was like watching a broadcast signal go dead. Still lit but empty. Meanwhile, I moved into a new role. Strategic advisor for joint engineering operations. It wasn't flashy, no promotions or press releases, but across the branches, across the bases, my name started circulating in a different tone. Not whispered, respected, trusted. Teams began to reach out, ask for early input. They didn't want politics. They wanted clean data, candid answers. I gave them what I always had. Unfiltered analysis, backed by experience and precision. I never mentioned her, never brought up the past. I didn't need to. The system had watched. It had taken longer than it should have, but it had seen. What surprised me most wasn't the outcome. It was the peace. Not the kind that comes from winning, but the kind that comes from surviving intact. I never needed revenge. I never needed her to fall. I just needed space to do what I was trained to do, and time did the rest. Some nights, I still think back to that first message, the one that told me to figure it out alone, and in a way I did. I figured out who I was when no one was watching, what I stood for when nobody clapped, and how truth, however buried, has a way of climbing back to the surface. We spend so much time chasing the next title, the next corner office, the next approval, but maybe the real win is simpler, just doing the job right, day after day, even when no one's looking. So I'll ask you this. What would you do if you knew nobody would give you credit? Would you still do it right? Or would you wait for someone to notice first?